G'day, how can you meet an F1 driver for a selfie or an autograph? It's possible. Yes, you're going to have to do a little bit of research and put in some hours, but in this video there's everything you'll need to know. First of all, you need to find a driver. Let's talk at the track at the moment. A little bit later in this video, I'll give you some hints on where you can find them away from the track. But at the track, your best chance is probably in the paddock. If you haven't got paddock access, and that's probably going to be most of you, there is an opportunity at some tracks to get the drivers going through the swipe gate, so they will interact with the public before they go into the paddock. Prime example is the Melbourne Walk in Australia. Not all drivers do the walk, some go the other entrance and completely bypass all of those people who have queued up for hours. But at the Melbourne Walk, it's a general ticket that gets you in. Another good example is at Silverstone, where people with certain tickets have access to this area, and drivers will often stop and sign autographs on their way in. Some of those people wait there all day and get them on the way out as well. This is the entrance to the paddock in Singapore, and it's accessible if you have tickets for that area or if you're staying in any of the hotels that are around the track, like the Ritz-Carlton. But in those instances, you're going to have a lot of people surrounding you. Everybody wants an autograph. Everybody wants a selfie. And if you want to be one of the lucky few, you're probably going to have to stand out. And that might be having a sign, being an obvious fan of a driver. I've seen some people with a number of shirts and hats and signs, and they appear to be fans of every one of those people and just switch them in and out as those drivers come in. But in those instances, there is a fair amount of luck as to whether the driver will stop just for you. If you're lucky enough to be in the paddock, your best chance of getting an autograph or a selfie is when a driver is alone or there's not too many of you about. And certainly note that drivers rarely stop in the paddock for anyone. I've seen people shouting, "Oh, Lando, Lando," from 5 metres away. Lando is not going to stop and turn back towards you. The people who are successful in the paddock will walk with the driver. They'll have their phone ready if they're doing a selfie, and they'll politely say, "May I grab a selfie?" In which case most of the drivers will gladly oblige. Now, there are a couple of things to bear in mind etiquette-wise. If you put your arm around Lewis Hamilton, his bodyguards will slap it away. And fair enough too, because I guess nobody has the right to place their hands on anyone. And I've seen people put their hands right over a guy's shoulder on their chest. So I would suggest be very careful with that one. If you're asking for an autograph, have whatever it is you want autographed ready, have your pen ready, and be prepared to lose it. Oftentimes a driver will sign your item, someone else's item, a third person's item, and then they'll completely lose track of whose pen it is, and your pen is gone. It's also wise to time your approach right. For instance, if there's a line of photographers and a driver's walking in and you are the only one there and you come up and ruin 30 photographers' shots, there'll be a couple of photographers, particularly some Europeans, who will just go crazy at you. If you have thick skin, it won't bother you. But you're often better off waiting until that driver gets past that wall of photographers and TV cameramen and then approaching them. And if you see a driver or team principal talking with people in the paddock and stationary, it's wise to wait until they're finished. Obviously know which way they are going to go, and that's not hard to predict. If they're heading into the track and going to their hospitality suite, you'll know which way they're going to leave, and then bide your time and ask them as they depart. I remember, where was it? Austin. A young woman came screaming up to Daniel Ricciardo, top of her voice, "Daniel, Daniel." He's talking to 3 people in the paddock, and the woman grabs Daniel by the shoulder and pulls him round for a selfie. I got to tell you, it wasn't received kindly. And I'm sure drivers understand that a lot of times the people that are coming up to them are very excited because it may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Like this woman here in Abu Dhabi going back some years ago. She was so in awe of Sebastian. She was in tears and could hardly breathe. That happens occasionally. And I understand why. People have spent their whole lives perhaps watching Formula One. They've seen these people, these drivers on television, and the moment sometimes becomes just too much for them. Another thing to remember is that some paddocks are busier than others. If you're lucky enough to go to Bahrain, you'll find that that is an ideal paddock because it's huge, there are long walks involved for the drivers, and there are far fewer people in that paddock than there would be, say, at Kota or Las Vegas or Silverstone. If you want a picture sign, just be aware that it needs to be the right picture. I was made acutely aware of this in Belgium when Lewis Hamilton said, "Look, I can't sign that," to someone who presented this photo to him for a signature. So I would advise you to be careful with the pictures that you take for them to sign. I've also seen drivers refusing to sign certain merchandise that's not from their team or something that might compromise them, perhaps even in a commercial way. And speaking of commercial arrangements, you've probably seen my collaborations I do with drivers. But I often see people, almost always guys, with suitcases full of pictures, and they'll go up to a driver and ask for a signature, but they'll have 7 or 8 of different pictures. And I'm thinking, why is a driver signing that? Because they're getting nothing out of that. And clearly that person is doing it for commercial purposes. But if you're watching this video, I doubt that you'll be doing it for that reason. Although if you value your picture and some point down the track you decide to sell it, it's always wise to have pictorial evidence of the driver signing it. That'll be tricky if you're on your own, but if there's a professional photographer around, they get a shot of it, you might be able to go and buy those images somewhere online. A question I'm often asked is, where can I find a driver? Well, there is. There's one place where I know they're going to be every single week, or 2 places actually. One is on Friday night at the driver's briefing, and that happens 90 minutes after FP2 on a Friday. It's a great time for us to get photographs and for you to find a driver, because they all have to come to the press conference room for that briefing, which normally lasts an hour, sometimes longer, and then they head back to wherever they've come from. And the other opportunity for you is the driver's parade. And once again, we're talking about access inside the paddock. Every driver has to go out to that driver's parade. They'll normally arrive a few minutes prior to it starting. They'll be out on track for maybe 25 minutes, and then they'll come back. So if you're in the paddock then, find out where they assemble and be around that spot. Actually, I've shortchanged myself here. There are a couple of other opportunities where you know drivers will be. On the Thursday, if you're in the paddock, and typically that's not a day where you would have paddock access, but if you are, know that 6 drivers head to a press conference, normally mid-afternoon. So if you're around the press conference room, you'll see them go in and out. On top of that, you've got press conferences after Friday around the TV media pen, Saturday after qualifying, and Sunday after the race. But know that those times it's crazy busy down there, and you'll be fighting with a lot of people to get some attention from a driver. Oh, and if you wait outside the FAI garage, I do warn you that if a driver's had a particularly ordinary session and you rush them as they come out of that garage, you may not be met with the nicest response. A lot of what I've talked about here is involving people who have paddock access, which is the minority, not the majority. So there are opportunities at certain tracks for fan zone appearances. And if you're there early and are prepared to wait sometimes hours, you could end up meeting a driver on stage. But that does require quite a bit of commitment. In Silverstone this year, this young lady had a master strategy, and I think she did it last year as well. She would stand with some sweets at the entry to the swipe gates, and she would get most of the drivers and team principals as they came in. And if you're a driver or a team principal, it'd be almost impossible for you to walk past that young lady without stopping and giving her some attention. I must say that youngsters have a better chance of getting a selfie or an autograph, particularly with someone like Lewis. To be honest, I'd be very lucky to get an autograph if I was just a business person in the paddock. But Lewis and a number of other drivers will make an extra effort for young fans. Having a gift for a driver is another strategy that works well. I often see drivers wearing those bracelets that young fans, mostly young fans and females, make for the drivers and grab their attention as they walk in. And many of them are rewarded when they see video or photographs of the driver wearing those particular bracelets. On a much smaller scale, whenever I see anyone with one of my bucket hats on or with one of my F1 driver's book, I stop for them because they've invested in me, and I love that about them, and drivers are the same. So if you are a genuine Lando fan or a genuine Logan Sargent fan and you're wearing their merchandise or have any of their products, you've got a much better chance of getting their attention. If you have plenty of dollars in your pocket, you might consider getting a hospitality package with something like F1 Experiences or one of the teams. I did that going back 2016 in Abu Dhabi, paid the money for a Red Bull package, got a photo with Daniel Ricciardo, and that weekend was the forerunner to me getting my start in Formula One. Here's an opportunity for those of you not in the paddock. Know that at most tracks, the drivers have to take an entry into and out of the track, and almost all of them will be driving. And I can give you an example of Monza. On the way out at Monza, the traffic is heavy. Even at night, some hours after the end of the day's activities, drivers leave and the traffic is stop-start. And I've seen so many fans waiting all the way out to the main road and hoping that Carlos or Oscar winds their window down as they leave. And I guess it's hard for a driver to ignore 10 or 20 people around their car when they're sitting stationary in traffic. So that covers you at the track. What about away from the track? Well, yes, look for sponsor commitments. Daniel Ricciardo might be at an Optus store in Melbourne doing an appearance. Pierre Gasly might be doing something for his Hawkers sunglasses brand. keep an eye on their social media for updates on that. And if you're looking at their social media, you'll sometimes see that they're staying at different hotels, and they'll post photos perhaps from their room. If you know what hotel they're staying at, and particularly Mexico, it's crazy. Hundreds of people queue up out the front. In Budapest, same thing. But know that it's difficult if you're with lots of people to get the attention of a driver. So I've seen some fans, really avid fans, actually book hotels that drivers are staying at in order that they can be inside instead of outside, where you've got a much better chance. Airports are another great opportunity. In Liège, we had all these young people waiting out of the front of the general aviation terminal, hoping that a driver will stop once they come in. Many were rewarded. And if you go into a commercial terminal like Montreal, when I happen to be walking out with Charles Leclerc, it turns into a rowdy rebel because there is really no one there to supervise things and people just get a bit too excited. Hopefully you've learned a thing or two about how to get a selfie with the driver or an autograph. And if you have and you've liked it, please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so, and there is an opportunity if you get a whole lot of extras by becoming a member. Oh, and there's a whole lot of extra stuff right there. Thanks for watching and stay passionate. What? Sometimes